Welcome, everyone, to the Gifts of God program, weekly talk. It's a beautiful day here in Washington, D.C., and I've been getting up early and saying my mantras and just loving every minute of it. And I discovered something about the mantras when we were in Venice, and things were kind of coming to me. I was very relaxed. And what I was thinking about in terms of the mantra, and also the lessons in the Course in Miracles are like mantras. You know, they're something you put in your mind. What came to me was that the mantra, rather than being a means to something else, like let's just say you're feeling depressed and you want to say the mantra to make yourself happy, right? So you're trying to use the mantra to get out of the depression into the happiness. Well, you have to see that the mantra is the happiness. It's not a means to an end. It is the thing, right? So that made a huge difference when I was saying the mantra. Like often, and Monique knows this very well, Om Namah Shivaya was a very strong mantra that Babaji gave all of us, and we've probably said tens of thousands of Om Namah Shivayas over the years. But when you see it as not a means to something, but actually the something, you eliminate the gap between the mantra and that state, that high spiritual state. So I don't know, it seemed like a simple observation, but it made a lot of difference when I was saying the mantras. If I just said, well, these mantras are the happiness. So when I'm saying the mantra, picture myself feeling the happiness, or just put myself in that intention to feel the happiness of simply saying the mantra. The vibration of the mantra is the happiness. And so that helped me quite a lot. And then when I was thinking about the Course in Miracles lessons, I was thinking the same thing. You know, for our good fortune, they're in English, right? They're not Sanskrit. They're not some foreign tongue. They're a language we understand, but they're still mantras. They're a vibration. They're a frequency. There are some words that impart a different mindset, right? So Tara Singh once said this definition of the word mantra. He said, man means mind, and tra is what you put in the mind. So mantra is the mind and what you put in it. So if you put fear in the mind, you have a mind full of fear. If you put, concern, you have mind full of concern. So a lot of what the mantra that we, like Om Namah Shivaya, it's actually designed to remove your concern, your fear, your doubt, your anxiety, your anger. So, because that's what Shiva is. Shiva is that which destroys your ignorance or removes from you illusion. So the mantra in that case, it's removing your illusions. And I think that's what the Course in Miracles lessons are also trying to do. They're trying to get us in a different frequency in our mind, remove the illusions, and put in our mind what God wants to put in there. You know, God's will for me is perfect happiness. So we have to ask ourselves, well, is perfect happiness in my mind? And if it's not, then what is in my mind? And why is that in my mind? So just the statement, God's will for me is perfect happiness, it would help you examine what's in your mind and remove what's not perfect happiness. So if you, like many of us spiritual folks, we want to try to make our will one with the divine will or one with the universal will, and then it says, well, God's will for us, that universal will for us is to have perfect happiness. Then it would follow that if we're not feeling the perfect happiness, then we're doing some side will. We're doing some will that's not that universal will. And it's our responsibility to let that go, to undo that, to release that in ourselves. So a lot of the miracle is, one could almost say, reparative. It's like corrective. It's trying to remove what shouldn't be there, which would be what Shiva does. Shiva destroys our ignorance or removes our illusions. So that's the first thing that has to happen. And then once we've done an adequate amount of that, and we've removed enough of our subconscious and sometimes very conscious crap, this other vibration, this other frequency could come forward, and the Course would call that perfect happiness. And then it would go even farther to say, well, that's God's will for you, is to always be in that state of perfect happiness. So I was thinking about what would I talk about today, and what would I write about tomorrow for the Monday holding hands with you. And it just came to me, this phrase, the habit of happiness. Like we have a lot of habits. We could look at them and we would probably all have to admit we have these habits. We have these tendencies. We have these things that we repeat in our life. Now, some of these habits are desirable, but some of these habits are maybe tendencies we don't like about ourselves, and we're trying to get over them, but they seem kind of stubborn, and they're like kind of there. And so we have habits. Well, what if we nurtured this habit of happiness? If God's will for us is perfect happiness, and we nurture this habit of being in that state, then we would be making our will one with God's will. And it's like a practice. So it's just as much a spiritual practice as, say, yoga or breathing processes that we do. It's just as much a spiritual practice to be in the habit of happiness. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, this habit of happiness, because the Course talks about it quite a lot. So I was reviewing that lesson, God's will for me is perfect happiness. That's lesson 101. And what I found while I was reviewing that lesson was that lesson 100 is actually more about the happiness. Lesson 101 is more about not falling into the pitfall of thinking you're a sinner, right? Because those are mutually exclusive. If you think you're a sinner, then you can't truly be perfectly happy, because you won't think you deserve it, right? So lesson 101 is trying to remove this notion of us being a sinner. But lesson 100 is, my part is essential for God's plan for salvation. It's talking about, for 3 or 4 lessons, salvation, like I will accept my part in God's plan for salvation. Salvation is my only function here. And then it says, well, my part is essential in God's plan for salvation. So I wanted to go a little bit more into that lesson, as it was saying some wonderful things and very joyful things, you know, and that's there's kind of two ways that the Course in Miracles presents facts to us. It like on one hand, it tells us the facts of how screwed up our ego is and how much we deceive ourselves with our ego, right? And how dismal it is, and it's going to lead to death. So it really paints this picture of like, you know, our dark side. And it describes it probably better than anything I've ever read, is how the darkness of the ego unfolds in life, right? So the Course is very specific about describing that. And then the other fact that it presents, and thank goodness it does, is our true self. It's like our God-created self, or our Christ self, or our self that the Course is trying to give us the miracles to awaken into, right? We're trying to awaken into this self God created, and in order to do that, we need the miracles to undo the places where we're in the habit of the ego. So it gives us both sides, right? It gives us the picture of how dismal it is to be in the ego, but then it gives us a little kind of, thread leading out of the labyrinth, so that we can follow that enough to get out of it into this other dimension of the perfect happiness. And it's very beautiful how it does that. So these lessons are very essential. You know, I think lesson 97 says, I am spirit. I am spirit. It's the shortest lesson. It's only 3 words. I am spirit. I will accept my part in God's plan for salvation. Salvation's my only function here, and salvation and forgiveness are the same. And then it says, my part is essential in God's plan for salvation. So until we ascend, and our resistance to ascending, until we ascend, the rest of the sonship can't ascend, right? So we have to get it. Like, we have to put our focus, put our hearts, put our intentions, put our whole being into this ascension process where we manifest salvation in our own life. And then, you know, the more you look at it, you say, well, that's the same as saying perfect happiness. Like, I can't be saved and depressed, right? Or I can't be saved and have a whole string load of problems that are unresolved in my life. You know, saved means you're saved, you're joyful, you're problem-free, you're conflict-free, you're in the flow, you're living your life in a state that's very productive, very happy, very giving, very engaging, you know, and you make a difference in your own life, in the people's lives around you. You have something to give, and that gift is very energizing. And the more you give that gift, it's like the more it increases. So that's kind of the flow, right? And that's kind of accepting your part in God's plan for salvation. And then it says, well, your part is very essential. Like, the whole sonship of the whole world could not even happen until you get your part. Like, you could block it, in other words. if you, knowing what you know, and you've been given all this opportunity and you don't accept it and you resist it and you go the other way, it's kind of like what Tara Singh said once. He said, truth unapplied turns to poison. So it's like, well, you've had the opportunity to have such a thing as A Course in Miracles, and you've had the opportunity to hear certain enlightened beings say certain things that made things clear. And then if you don't apply it in your life, because you've had the opportunity and many other people have not, that missed opportunity can turn a little bit sour or a lot sour. That's what he meant. He said, well, a truth unapplied can turn to poison. So if we don't apply these things, then it's almost like it's kind of almost better we didn't even hear them, right? Because once you've sort of been shown the light and you reject the light, you're more responsible for that rejection than if you never even saw it, So I wanted to go into this lesson, number 100. My part is essential for God's plan for salvation. Yeah, my part is essential to God's plan for salvation. This is lesson 100. It says, just as God's Son completes his Father, so your part in it completes your Father's plan. Salvation must reverse the mad belief in separate thoughts and separate bodies, which lead separate lives and go their separate ways. One function shared by separate minds unites them in one purpose, for each one of them is equally essential to them all. So that's basically just saying that we're connected. Earlier it says there's only one problem and one solution, and the problem is separation, or our imagined separation. We took these bodies and we identify with these bodies, and it's a device that we can use to kind of prove our separation. Well, my body is not your body, and you have your own body, and I have my own body, and my interests in my body are separate from your interest in your body. So we often use the body as a proof of the separation. So then here comes the Course in Miracles, and it says, well, you're not a body, you're a mind, you're a thought in the mind of God, and that all minds are joined, and you can either join in this false mind of separation, or you can join in this true mind of the Christ where everyone's unified. And you only have those two choices, right? But you're going to have to make one or the other. So this is what we're up against. Are we going to join? Are we going to see ourselves as unified, one, or are we going to remain separated? And this is the question of God's plan for salvation, right? It uses that word a lot. And originally when I read that, the word salvation, I think many of us who were very careful, we didn't want to fall into any fundamentalist religions ever again. The word salvation had kind of a charge on it, right? So, and the Course uses that quite a lot, salvation. But all it really means is we give up the false, we give up the pain and suffering of the ego's thought system. and of our own experience, right? We look at that, we forgive it all, we let it go, and we wake up to this kind of new frequency where we don't have any problems. We're in a state of perfect happiness. and it's like our life has purpose and it has joy. And I mean, what's so bad about that, you know? So I think when I saw that that's what the meaning of the word salvation was when it came to the Course in Miracles, it wasn't such a bad thing, you know? Salvation and forgiveness are the same, it says in lesson 99. Salvation is my only function here. Then it says salvation and forgiveness are the same. So when you reach the point where your forgiveness is complete and you've forgiven everyone and everything, and you've accepted this atonement, which is just, it's like complete forgiveness, right? You could define atonement as the complete forgiveness where you have no grievances whatsoever towards anybody or anything or yourself or any situation. Then you could say, well, my forgiveness is complete and I have accepted the atonement for myself. And that would be salvation. And that would also be the doorway into joy, or the doorway into this perfect happiness that the lesson's talking about. So when it says, well, okay, my part is essential to God's plan for salvation, and then it says, oh, okay, you're getting over this separation. One function shared by separate minds unites them in one purpose. So, like, you did have separate minds, but when you recognize you have one function together, you're uniting those separate minds in one function, one purpose, and each one of them is equally essential to them all. So that means everybody's life has purpose and meaning. And, you know, even people that don't study the Course in Miracles, they have just as much purpose and meaning than we who are studying this. We who are consciously trying to end the separation. Well, what about people that don't even realize that's the issue? Well, they're equally part of the salvation, right? So we can't hold anyone outside of this God's plan for salvation. Then here's the key line, and this is the first time it actually says this, and it's the theme of the next lesson. It says, God's will for you is perfect happiness. Why should you choose to go against his will? The part that he has saved for you to take in working out his plan is given you that you might be restored to what he wills. This part is as essential to his plan as to your happiness. Your joy must be complete to let his plan be understood by those whom he sends to you. They will see their function in your shining face and hear God calling to them through your happy laugh. Well, basically, it's saying, you know, you have a function in the salvation of the world, and it begins by you accepting your own happiness. God's will for you is perfect happiness. So, you know, to be part of the, quote, plan, the plan for salvation, or God's plan for salvation, it would go hand in hand with you being a happy camper, you know, like in general, you know, not just when good things are happening, but you've decided that, okay, no matter what's going on in the external, I'm going to remain centered. I'm going to remain in my state of inner joy, no matter what's happening. And I think this gets back to what I was saying about the mantra. The mantra can be used and used quite effectively, or maybe even more effectively, when we see that the mantra is the very thing that we're wanting it to get us to, right? If we're wanting to use the mantra to awaken this perfect happiness in us, and then we see, wow, it's actually the mantra that is the perfect happiness. Like when we're saying the mantra, you can't say the mantra truly, like fully with it, fully conscious, without experiencing the perfect happiness that the mantra imparts, right? So that was kind of a breakthrough for me this week when I saw that, well, the statement of the mantra, or let's just say the lesson of the Course in Miracles, it itself imparts the miracle. So when you read, oh, my part's essential in God's plan for salvation, well, when you read that lesson, it's like you are accepting your part in God's plan for salvation. You are accepting it by just reading that lesson. I will accept my part in God's plan for salvation. Well, that's just a statement of your will. I will accept my part in God's plan for salvation. So we're matching wills with something higher. We're matching our will with this higher will. And when we do that, it's almost like there's no gap anymore. It's not like, well, you have to practice this lesson 1,000 times in order to get it. No, when you get it, it's like it transcends practice. It just imparts it and you receive it. I'm so glad that my life is part of God's plan for salvation, and I've accepted my part in that, and it's essential. It says my part is essential to God's plan for salvation. So you see what I mean? There's like the miracle is like swifter than light. It's like, okay, if it's a real miracle, it's like there's no time, there's no space. It's like you read it, you get it, you recognize it, and it imparts the miracle, it imparts the energy, and you have the energy and you're liberated. And then why would you want to do anything else? Like, why would you want to dream up some grievances that would throw you out of the perfect happiness? If you're really experiencing the perfect happiness, which is what it's trying to get us to get to, right? And be in this habit of happiness all the time. It's like our default system. Well, what is your default system? Is it happiness or is it criticism? Or is it dissatisfaction? You know, what's your default system? If something goes wrong, what do you default to? Do you sort of brush it aside and say, well, I'm not going to let this interfere with my happiness? Or do you let it throw you off? You know, it's a good question, you know? And there are certain things that throw you off more. Like this week, we had a friend of ours from India pass away suddenly. He wasn't very old. He was like 58. And he died of a heart attack, unexpected. And everybody was shocked. Like, God, he seems so healthy. He seems so vibrant, you know? And he was very with it. He was one of the people that helped run the ashram and kept it all going smoothly. And he was always a very happy, joyous person. So that wasn't, you know, that wasn't it. But then all of a sudden it was like, boom, you know, he's gone. So how do you respond to that? And we were in Venice when we found out. and we were having a good time, right? And we find out our friend passed away. We were just, I mean, for a while we were shocked, but then at the same time we were saying, well, he wouldn't want us to grieve and get all down in the dumps and, blah, blah, blah. No, he would want us to maintain our perfect happiness. And, we did our due diligence and said our condolences to the family and so forth. But there we are, putting ourselves back in the vibration of perfect happiness. And if you slip, you got to look at that. Why did I slip? Am I expected to go into the doldrums with everybody else? And that's true. When someone passes away and people go into the doldrums about it, they expect everyone around them to go into the doldrums too. And if you say, well, it's just, the passing of a soul out of their body, is just a natural thing, and we don't even understand it fully. We do study it, and we do see that our thoughts contribute to that, and those decisions, but there's so much subconscious material around that, and so much, karmic stuff around it that you have no idea to understand. It's like at some point you just have to say, well, I accept. I accept this is somehow in some perfection that I don't understand. And then once you get to that point, it's like, okay, I let go, and let's get back to the perfect happiness. Let's get back to accepting my part in God's plan for salvation. It says, you are indeed essential to God's plan. Without your joy, His joy is incomplete. That's a powerful line. God's plan is joy, right? God's plan for me, God's will for me is perfect happiness. So you have to see that God's plan is a plan of joy. But without your joy, His joy is incomplete. Without your smile, the world cannot be saved. While you are sad, the light that God Himself appointed as the means to save the world is dim and lusterless, and no one laughs because all laughter can but echo yours. So we have a choice here, We can keep being depressed about the situation at hand. Oh, Trump just got elected. I can't tell you how many of our friends wrote us and said, well, I might as well just check out now because Trump got elected, and it was like, are you serious? Like, they were serious. They were saying, well, I'm over 70 and maybe I've lived my life long enough, and it's such a bad situation now here in America. Why don't I just check out and leave it to the younger kids, And well, I think we're being asked not to fall for that. Not to fall for that. It's like politics. I was kind of healed of politics when I was with Tara Singh. And I was healed this way because he was very much in his younger years into politics. He knew people like Nehru and Mrs. Roosevelt, and he came to this country and he met all these very high people because he was more or less kind of a ambassador. He knew Nehru and those people, Gandhi. It was when India first got their independence. So he knew all those people. And then he met Krishnamurti, and Krishnamurti said, politics never solved the problems of man. And yes, you can have these sort of lofty ideals, but the politics is only going to be as good as the inner workings of those people who are quote unquote the politicians. So if they haven't overcome fear, guilt, anger, greed, in themselves, they're only going to make policies that may seem good, but they're going to contain all those impurities. Right? So he said politics never really solved the problems of man. And in that instant, Tara Singh was free. It's like all those associations, yeah, he still had Mrs. Roosevelt as a friend, but he knew that that wasn't the avenue that was going to liberate mankind from their problems. It was an internal action, and it would have to take place on the individual level. One person at a time kind of thing. So it ceased being a cause and more of a spiritual practice. And Krishnamurti made that clear to him. And I think when you start studying the Course in Miracles, that becomes clear to us. It's a spiritual practice, and we work on ourselves with the lessons. And the lessons are there to liberate us, but we have to give it the energy. Yeah. So, okay. You're indeed essential to God's plan. Without your joy, his joy is incomplete. You are indeed essential to God's plan, just as your light increases every light that shines in heaven, so your joy on earth calls to all minds to let their sorrows go and take their place beside you in God's plan. God's messengers are joyous, and their joy heals sorrow and despair. They are the proof that God wills perfect happiness for all who will accept their Father's gifts as theirs. Well, there you have it. It's like saying there is a plan. God has a plan for salvation. And that plan is a plan of joy. It's a plan of transcending sorrow, despair, anger, fear, guilt. It's a transcendental plan. It puts us above all the earthly, despair, all the sorrows. Now, we're challenged because things come along and it's easy to get upset. Tara Singh used to say, I want to get you people to the point where you're unaffected by the external. Now, that's a lofty statement. What do you mean by that? Well, if you're saying the mantra, God's will for me is perfect happiness, and you're truly saying it, you are going to be in a state of perfect happiness. You see it, you recognize it, you realize it, and then you are the happiness. And that's God's plan for you. And it has nothing to do with the externals. Most of us, kind of think of happiness, well, if we get things arranged in a certain way and we get this lined up over here and this works over here and our bank account starts like increasing and, we get our nice house in the suburbs with a 2-car garage. We have these conditions that our happiness is based on. And then if they don't sort of unfold like that, the whole house of cards falls down. But what about this perfect happiness? It says perfect happiness. It may have nothing to do with the external, how things are lined up. It's like a matter of will, it says. It's a matter of, I will there be light. That's a lesson. I will there be light. I think it's 73. Yeah. I will there be light. And then it says, there is no will but God's. And then it says, well, the light has come and I've totally forgiven the world. I will there be light. That's me willing that. I will there be light. And then it says, well, the light is also God's will. There's no will other than God's will. So when you're lining up your will with God's will, there's only one thing to will. That's like the light of perfect happiness. All right? So I will there be light. There is no will but God's. That's 74. Then it says, well, the light's already come. The light's already there. Have you accepted it? Have you forgiven the world completely? Yourself, starting with yourself? You've forgiven yourself completely, and you've forgiven everybody else because they're just making the same old mistakes that you made. So how can you blame somebody else for making the same mistakes that you made, right? So it's when you forgive yourself, you're forgiving everyone else because they are you. And it's the same mistake. It's the mistake of separation. And you forgive yourself for that. You see, that's not true. I just, it was a dream I dreamed up, a sorrowful dream. And now it's coming to an end. I'm seeing it's not possible to be separated. So, okay, I will there be light. There is no will but God's. And the will of God is perfect happiness for you. And then that's the light. And the light's come and I embrace it. And my part in taking up that will is essential. My part is essential in God's plan for salvation. Well, and then you become a font of happiness. You've developed a habit of happiness and people notice it, right? People notice, oh, well, when I'm with Monique, I feel pretty good, and we have a good time, and we go to the concerts in Holland, and we go out on the boats in Amsterdam, and we go to the best restaurants, and we have a good time, and we go to the museums and see all the art. So it's like you're nurturing this happiness. Oh, and we stay in the best hotel that's just beautiful. So you give yourself that. And then that nurtures happiness and people see that in you. Oh, yeah. So, I will there be light. There is no will but God's, and God's will for you is perfect happiness. And then you see, well, the happiness is already there. It doesn't rely on external conditions. You decide. Heaven is the decision I must make, right? Heaven is the decision I must make. Yeah, I think that's 138. Heaven is the decision I must make. So happiness, you could say happiness is a decision I must make. And when you make a decision, it doesn't necessarily rely on external conditions being lined up certain ways, right? And then it says, well, I'm under no laws but God's. Well, what's the law of God? Well, the will of God is for you to be perfectly happy. And then you have something to give. You have your joy to give, right? You have your joy to give. Let's see if we can go on and finish this thing up. It's got some beautiful things at the end. We will not let ourselves be sad today. For if we do, we fail to take the part that is essential to God's plan, as well as to our vision. Sadness is the sign that you would play another part instead of what has been assigned to you by God. So God has assigned to us a part that leads us to supreme happiness. That's God's will for us. That's our only Only thing we have to do is accept that. Thus do you fail to show the world how great the happiness he wills for you, and so you do not recognize that it is yours. Today we will attempt to understand joy is our function here. Joy is our function here. How much more clear does it need to be made, right? The Course in Miracles is not ambiguous, not at all. It's crystal clear, it's sharp, it's like a diamond of discrimination. It's that sharply cut. Today we will attempt to understand joy is our function here. If you are sad, your part is unfulfilled, and all the world is thus deprived of joy along with you. God asks you to be happy, so the world can see how much he loves his son, and wills no sorrow rises to abate his joy. That means nothing's going to come in your path that's going to throw you off from your perfect happiness. Hurricane comes, hey, you deal with it. Friend you've known from years kicks the bucket, hey, you deal with it. You get back on track. No fear besets him to disturb his peace. You are God's messenger today. You bring his happiness to all you look upon, his peace to everyone who looks on you and sees his message in your happy face. And then it talks about, giving 5 minutes to feeling this perfect happiness. I think we all should do that at some point, right? I'm doing it now when I say the mantras. I'm saying to myself, these mantras are designed to give me perfect happiness, and they are the perfect happiness. So while I'm saying them, I'm not going to be thinking like, oh, I got to say another round of 100 or 1,000, or I got to do this to get to here. No, I am here while I'm saying the mantra. I am in a state of happiness while I'm repeating the mantra. The mantra is the happiness. Later on, there's a lesson that says God's means and end are one. In me, God's means, which would be the forgiveness or the mantra, the means and the end, which would be what you're trying to get, is the perfect happiness, right? That's the end. Well, the means and the end are one. In me, God's means and end are one, which would mean that's the miracle. You read the lesson and you receive what the lesson is imparting, and it's instantaneous. You can't separate the two. And that's how with it you are. And then you can say, well, the means, which is the miracle, and the end, which is the salvation and the liberation and the joy, are one. So no difference. We prepare ourselves for this today by feeling happiness arise in us according to our Father's will and ours. Begin the exercises with the thought today's idea contains. Then realize your part is to be happy. Only this is asked of you or anyone who wants to take his place among God's messengers. So you want to be one of God's messengers? Well, God doesn't have sad messengers. So if you want to keep your doldrums, that means you've decided you don't want to be a messenger. Think what this means. You have indeed been wrong in your belief that sacrifice is asked. You but receive according to God's plan and never lose or sacrifice or die. Not even death at this state of being is real. You're God's messenger. You're immortal. You're fully alive in your perfect happiness. You know, yesterday we did the mantra breathing on overcoming the unconscious death urge. And there was one lesson that I read a little bit from, lesson 163. There is no death. The Son of God is free. And then it was saying, well, when you're irritated, that's the death urge. When you're confused, that's the death urge. When you're angry, that's the death urge. When you're doubtful, that's the death urge. And that's not God's plan for you. And then I re-looked at that lesson because it was talking in this one about being God's messenger. It has the most beautiful prayer at the end of that lesson 163. And at some point I even memorized it. It says, "My Father, we are your messengers." Let me see if I can get into it. "Bless our eyes today. We are your messengers, and we would look upon the glorious reflection of your love that shines in everything. We live and move in you alone. We are not separate from your eternal life. There is no death, for death is not your will. And we abide where you have placed us in the life we share with you and with all living things, to be a part of you and forever. We accept your thoughts as ours, and we are one with you eternally." So that's being God's messenger. You're in a state of joy that you're immortal. And there is no death. And this just says it again. You but receive according to God's plan and never lose or sacrifice or die. Now let us try to find the joy that proves to us and all the world God's will for us. It is your function that you find it here and that you find it now. For this you came. Let this one be the day that you succeed. Look deep within you, undismayed by all the little thoughts and foolish goals you pass as you ascend to meet the Christ in you. Well, there it is. Where are you going? What is this perfect happiness that it says is God's will for you? It's for you to make the contact with your true identity, which is this Christ self within you. You are the Christ. It's not an external entity. Yeah, there were spiritual masters like Jesus who showed us the way, and he demonstrated the Christ consciousness, but he demonstrated it so that you could find it in yourself. You are the Christ. You ascend to the state of perfect happiness. You accept God's plan for salvation. You see that your part, your particular part, Monique's part, Adrian's part, Donna's part, those parts are essential to the whole plan. And whatever that looks like, your part's not going to look like my part. My part's not going to look like your part. But whatever your part is, that all is essential in this ever-linking chain of forgiveness, this chain of perfect happiness. It's all part of it. So, okay, let's ascend to meet this Christ in us. He will be there, and you can reach him now. What could you rather look upon in place of him who waits that you may look on him. What little thought has power to hold you back? What foolish goal can keep you from success when he who calls to you is God himself? So God's calling on all of us to rise up into our true self, which is the Christ, which is this consciousness of who we are as we were created. And the state of that identity is perfect happiness, joy. He will be there. You are essential to his plan. You are his messenger today. We are your messenger, and we would look upon the glorious reflection of your love that shines on everything. That's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to spend our day. How could you not be happy with your day if you're looking at the glorious reflection of his love in everything you see? You are his messenger today, and you must find what he would have you give. Do not forget the idea for today between your hourly practice periods. It is yourself who calls to you today. It's the Christ in us that's calling us to be who we are. And it is him you answer every time you tell yourself you are essential to God's plan for the salvation of the world. You are essential. And what's that going to look like? You're an ambassador of perfect happiness. That's your only function here. You're an ambassador of perfect happiness. And make sure you have it. And then once you have it, it increases the more you give it. And then you're God's messenger. Okay, we get it? Y'all get it? You're God's messenger. What's the message? My happiness. My divine happiness. It's the only message. And that means complete forgiveness of everything. You don't hold agreements toward anything. Not a person, not a situation, not a thing from your past. Love holds no grievances. Okay, I give them all up. I'm in a state of love, which would have to mean joy, perfect happiness. And that's the message I'm going to give people. And therefore, I am God's messenger. Bole Baba Ki Jai. Thank you for joining us today.